My name is Sari van Poelje. I'm an expert in business innovation, which means I help leaders lead in a different way, cooperate in a different way, have relationships with their customers in a different way, and integrate commercial and innovation functions in a different way that actually makes you more agile and more up to date in today's market. I also have schools in 8 different countries to teach coaches and consultants to be agile and innovative. And one of the tools we use for that is transactional analysis. Now, we talked about the structure of your personality as an archetype. We talked about the functional ego states as a basis for communication. And now I want to talk about how do you actually recognize when someone is in one of those states? Well, we say that the only way to recognize it really is by in the communication and by observing behavior, really, but there are other ways as well. So let's find the 4 ways of recognizing how someone is in a certain ego state. Now, the first way to recognize how someone is in a certain ego state is through their behavior, both verbal, the words they use, the tone they use, but also nonverbal, their posture, their gestures, the way they look at you while they're communicating. So, for instance, this is a really traditional way. For instance, someone who's using negative critical parent, you'd go, "Why are you wearing those shoes today?" In this kind of a posture and a voice. Of course, I'm acting it now, so you don't get the full breadth of that. But the raised finger, the piercing look, the posturing like this, the tone of voice, all link to a critical parent or structuring parent way of communicating. In the positive side, you'd have that same force behind it without the negative tone. So you'd go, "Make 20 copies, please." And it's clear it's a directive, but without the hook of trying to make people smaller. But you can recognize it in the way I speak. Adult communication, you often see people really with a balanced posture, straight head, going, "Well, the fact of the matter is this and this and this." You hear a more neutral tone where people are neutral also in their nonverbals, but very clear about what they're saying. It's often a concise way of speaking. When it's not concise, by the way, and people drone on and on and on about facts, sometimes they slip into this negative critical parent, just so you know. What can you recognize of the nurturing way of behavior? So this is all for your diagnostic. So nurturing way, you see really metaphorically and literally people holding out their hands to you. The tone is softer. "What can I do for you?" There's often an inclination towards the person, and you see this whole caring aura around the communication. Rebellious child is really the slang, the wow, the we, you see the enthusiasm, you hear the going against in the way they say, "Why should we obey this?" This is the negative rebellious child. Adapted, you often see kind of the tilted head, the looking upwards, the making smaller. You go, "Okay, I'll do that. And all of this, I'm acting it out. It's, of course, an exaggeration of what you would see, but this is it. So the free child behavior is really open. It's making contact with the eyes. It's engaging. It's this inner enthusiasm apart from anything that's happening on the outside. And you can recognize it through the behavior, of course, because people seem free in their way of connecting. Yeah. You can see them smiling as well. But expressing authentic feeling can also be, of course, crying when something hurts, or, asking for help. It can all be, as long as it's authentic. Authenticity means you're congruent in the moment. Yeah. So you can recognize ego states through behavior, verbal, nonverbal. You can also recognize what ego state someone is in through your reaction. So if you can feel what ego state you get to be in when someone comes from some ego state, you can also recognize it. So it's really personal, I guess, but some things are just human. So when people do critical parent negative, they go bah, 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 bah. The natural thing to do, what most people do, is they go into adapted child or rebellious child. So anytime you feel yourself going, tilting the head and making yourself smaller, or going from rebellious child, chances are pretty great that someone is coming from parent, because we call that, and we'll get to that, it's complementary ego state. Yeah. So when someone comes from nurturing parents, then the almost natural reaction is to also go into nurturing parent. Usually care gives care. So if you feel yourself naturally also wanting to take care of someone when they take care of you, it's probably they're coming from nurturing parent. Or you go into free child, you go, thank you. If it comes from a positive nurturing parent. Of course, if it's smothering instead of mothering, you probably go into adapted child. Go, oh yeah, I have to be grateful now, kind of, that state. Adults, how do you recognize that? Probably because you go into adult as well. When someone is really factual, you're invited into that state yourself. So you would do that too. Yeah. So someone says, what time is it? You go, it's 9:45. It's very rare when someone says, what time is it? You go, why the hell don't you have a watch? You're going to have a really bad day if you do that. Usually people are invited into adult, and you can feel it. If you feel invited into adult, it's probable the other person is coming from adult. How do you recognize if people are coming from adapted or rebellious child? Well, either you also go there or you go into parent, because that's the complementary state. So if someone goes, what time is it? And someone goes, well, what the hell is it to you? You probably want to go into a parental state, because you go, well, that's impolite the way you're talking. And you can see that you react in a way that you say, oh, if I'm coming from there, probably they're coming from this rebellious negative or state. Or when I'm a manager and someone is in negative adapted child a lot, they go, yeah, of course, yeah, I'll do whatever you say. Yeah. I notice it because I go to parents. Well, I just want to go, hey, don't be so dependent on me. And I'm sure other managers may have the same reaction. So what I'm saying is the second way of regarding or researching really where someone else is coming from is through your own reaction, because you'll probably have a complementary reaction. So the first way to recognize it is through behavior. The second way is through how you react. We call that social diagnosis. The third way you kind of know where someone is coming from is historical, because everything I've shown you so far is like a format, an exaggerated version of what you can expect in behavior or in reaction. But truth to tell, there are no formats. People react in a very personal way. And you can only understand where they're coming from historically. So for instance, some people might seem on the outside to be reacting from like from negative critical parent. But historically, if you know something about them, for instance, they come from a family where, where their father always screamed at them, and this was their only protection, to go like this as well. Then in actual fact, even though they seem really critical parent on the inside, it might be that it comes from adapted child, And so historical diagnosis is a really important way to check where someone's coming from. I don't know, for instance, someone who talks from adult all the time, you can hear it, and maybe it's something they've been trained to do because historically in their families they were never allowed to show authentic emotion, so they hid it under fact. It's a really important way of understanding what ego state someone is coming from. We call that historical diagnosis. The last one, we call it phenomenological diagnosis, and it's really, this is more for people who do more therapeutic interventions. But sometimes you see someone as they were at a younger age. I don't know, I think everyone has had that experience, that sometimes you see someone and you see them almost like this. We used to have a cookie can in Holland where you saw someone drinking hot chocolate, looking in a mirror, and you saw their reflection in this mirror all the time. It's sometimes like that. You see someone and you see the reflection of who they were many years ago. We call that phenomenological diagnosis. You see them react in the way they used to react when they were 6, 12, 15. I recently went back to a reunion of my school. We hadn't seen each other in 38 years. And yet when I looked at their faces, I recognized their facial expressions from 38 years ago. I saw them as they were then. And some of them still reacted as they were then, which is interesting. It's really a phenomenological fact. So sometimes you can recognize where someone comes from through this kind of, they show you as they were then, because at the moment they developed their behavior, they kind of froze in time. And so you kind of know where it comes from. So how do you know where someone is coming from in terms of ego states? You can look at their behavior, verbal, nonverbal. You can look at your reaction, and probably you have a complementary one to the ego state they're showing. You can know their history, so you can place it within the context of what you know about them. And then kind of look at, okay, well, this looks like this, but actually it's probably this. Or you can look phenomenologically, where you can see their whole ego state come out at a certain age, the age at which they develop that type of behavior. And then you can place it in their developmental line. We say, to be absolutely sure where someone is coming from in terms of ego states, we say you need at least 3 checks. So behavior, your reaction, historical, are the ones we use most in coaching.